Welcome back to another episode of the Liberating Minds podcast, where we engage with topics, thematics, engage with thinkers, writers, and organizers within the social movements in Kenya and Africa, where we also continue to share ideas that challenge dominant narratives and sharpen the tools of liberation. I'm your host, Nicholas Mwangi, and today I'm honored to be in conversation with Sam Gathanga, activist, researcher, and author of a very powerful book and a member of the Organic Intellectuals Network. The book is Mathare, an urban bastion of anti-oppression struggle in Kenya. This is the book in discussion for today's episode. Sam's book is a deeply personal and also political journey that traces Mathare evolution from a colonial quarry to a center of grassroots resistance. It offers a counter-narrative to the ways poor urban spaces are often portrayed, and it's a very important text that attempts to restore the dignity and the power of place, which is Mathare. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sana Kumud, and I really appreciate. I'm really honored to be here. And yeah, as you've heard, I'm Gathanga Ndung'u, also a member of Organic Intellectual Networks, member of Mathare Social Center, and also the Revolutionary Socialist League. And I'm really delighted to be here, at least, discussing issues that trying to center histories of people who have been marginalized for long. These are groups that have been peripheralized, but whose history to some extent have been erased. And so I'm really delighted to be here today as we discuss this, and also as we debunk some of the things that we've known about Mathare, and also learning new aspects that maybe we've not been able to interact with them in our school curriculum. Yeah, thank you, Sana.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Sam. I think this is the first episode we are having and with you. And hopefully we have more on other issues and thematics that you have also been doing research. But to start us off, Sam, you opened the book by centering your story in your early childhood in Mathare. Why was it important for you to begin there? And how has growing up in Mathare shaped your identity and worldview?
I found myself in Mathare when I was really young. That was around 2000. I think it was about 5 years. And this is where I've grown up. I've grown up to be a man. From a young child to a boy to a teenager, adolescent, and now into a young man. And this is an area that I have. I have bittersweet memories of this place because of what has been happening, and how, I also wanted to know, to relate to the people, how Mathare has shaped me and how I view the world. And I think for me, the greatest opening that I had in Mathare or happened when I was joining high school. Living in one place, interacting with the same people of the same kind of class. And I'm not saying that there exists only one class in Mathare. There are also class within class. There are also subclasses within a class. But then, me now going out of Mathare and going to another area for my high school studies. That is when I understood, yeah, that we have different classes in the country, and that there are those who have and there are those who do not have things. And me seeing myself now in high school and seeing my classmates, being brought with different cars, and just seeing the difference in class, and the social economic difference that we had. I think that's a moment that something up to my brain, and really, yeah, I need to understand how this country has been and how unequal things are, and also me reflecting to where I come from. And telling my friends, oh, I come from Mathare, and then trying to question, how do I survive? Like, how have we survived all these years in Mathare? And Mathare has this rich history, and that has been really forgotten. But then people focus more on the Mathare Mental Hospital being the only psychiatric hospital in the country, being close to Mathare. Mathare has always been associated with the more of a psychiatric hospital. And so me talking to my friends in high school that I come from Mathare, and also even I'm actually my history teacher, trying to explain to him that I come from Mathare and I'm okay, I'm not mentally, challenged. It was a problem because most of them think that we are either like escapists from Mathare Mental Hospital, or we are somehow, just somehow maybe a little the patient who are in Mathare, and that's why we found ourselves here. But then, it even masks the potential that Mathare has because you have to be told that these are outsiders view Mathare from. But then for me, there is the lived reality that I've lived to Mathare. I know its challenges, yes. I won't try to hide the challenges that are there. But also there is the potential that we see in Mathare. There is a lot of talent that comes from Mathare. We've seen musicians, we've seen footballers, we've seen boxers. We've seen a lot of people come out of Mathare, and an example of I spoke about the issue of my son being born here, Mathare Youth Sports Association being born here. We've seen a lot of boxing people who've trained in Mathare Depot and other areas, but then all this is masked by the poverty, is masked by the crime, and other issues that we see maybe during post-election violence. So these issues come and mask what Mathare is, and they mask the beautiful stories that come from this community. They're really beautiful stories of how creatively people, make everyday kind of living possible. And this contributes to the kind of resilience that we've seen the residents of Mathare build over time. And Mathare has been existing for more than 100 years, and it has enabled them to, outlive all these regimes that have been there because they've been really repressive. So for me, I really wanted to, own Mathare as my home and own it as a place and tell its story to the world. Because, there is this alienation that we've had as people in Nairobi and also those in formal settlements. Most of those in Nairobi Eastland, there is the sense that you only live in Nairobi. Nairobi cannot be home to you. Mathare cannot be home because it's somewhere related to you. And this stems from the colonial structures of how Nairobi, racially stratified city, how racially stratified the city was. And for black natives, there is this kind of anti-blackness narratives against, natives in being in the city, that you can only come and work in the city and then go back to your homes. So for us, I felt, yes, I've known Mathare to be my home for long. I've known this way I've created all my social network for for the past more than 20 years. But then I still cannot hold Mathare and say that this is my home and I'm owning it as a home. So for me, it was always that desire to, to debunk this and also rewrite the story, and me trying to own this place that I've called home, really making it home and not just housing workers who just work in Taiga or work in industrial area. Because it has been, and even if you see how houses are being built in Eastland as Mathare, they are built like hostel, like, they're very, very small shacks, which are just like some kind of hostels where workers are just housed to go and work and come back. And further, that's Mathare and also other inland areas are very, I'd say, anti-family, because it was the men who used to work, who used to come and work in the cities as women stayed in the villages. In South Africa, they call them Bantus, the Bantu villages. Here we have the reserves and everything. And these are the areas where most women and families used to live. So Nairobi was not really meant for the African families. So for me, I think it stems from a story, wanting to own Mathare and tell its beautiful story and also own it as a home. That's why I first introduced myself by locating myself in Mathare, where I grew up, where I called home, where I made all my social kind of infrastructure. So it stems from that. And also trying to undo this narrative about Mathare being a place for, just people seeing violence, people seeing crime, people seeing drugs, people seeing maybe just a lot of vices in the community and maybe seeing post-election violence. And Mathare is more than that, and there is a lot of potential and history that has been embedded in the structures of all our place that is called Mathare.
Thanks, Sam, for that in-depth introduction to the text. It's a very important book because it is also the first book on Mathare from a narrative or counterpoint that tries to restore a true story or a narrative of Mathare.
Mm,
And so,
mm,
being that you have described both the hardship
mm,
that you saw and you grew up under, and the beauty of life also in Mathare that you've also presented. I wanted to understand, as a writer, how do you hold these contradictions together?
So, yeah, I think Mathare it's a place for this, really, this kind of, contradiction that exists within the communities. Yeah, on the other hand, and that's why I also put that have bittersweet kind of memories about Mathare. The things that I've seen that really make me feel question a lot of politics, question my life, question a lot of things, and then I also think that I look at and also see them as maybe a symbol of hope and everything, and tracing back Mathare back to its colonial eras, and I want to do a comparative just a moment to mention something. Looking how Mathare has been criminalized and how other slums or poor neighborhoods in Mathare are maybe, the kind of relation they have with the state. You find that Kibra, which is the largest slum in Africa and also in Kenya, it was somehow occupying some kind of meaning of this. It had some kind of legitimacy to it, and the reason stems from the fact that most of the people who stayed in Kibra were Sudanese and Nubians. And from this, the Nubian people, most of them fought as part of Kenya African Rifles. And so after this, they were given by the crown by that time, they were given that land as to occupy it as a thank you, some kind of a thank you by the crown to the Nubians who helped them fight the war that they were fighting. But then for Mathare, it occupies this kind of niche, it being criminalized, it being an area regarded as it was actually regarded as a place where cheap illicit alcohol is sold. This is where they say this is where the prostitute camp. This is where rebels from Moma who have been living. This is where all manner of crime and rebellious people live. So there is this lens of criminality that Mathare has been described with since the colonial government established its ground here up to this moment. Mathare is always viewed as some kind of lens of criminality, which is not seen. Yes, other slums are also viewed with this kind of lens, but then the kind of criminality that Mathare is viewed is somewhat different, and this stems from the kind of there's a lot of rebellion and people rising against government that has happened a lot here in Mathare, which makes it in that sense. But then now trying to bring, all these contradictions that exist in one space that it's a Mathare actually it's a very small area, but it's really a very multicultural area. And trying to find other nationalities from other countries. You'll find Karamajong in Mathare, you'll find that's why you have Kampalandogo, you'll find people from Ethiopia and Burji from Ethiopia, you'll find people from Somalia, you'll find all manner of people. And that's why it makes it more of a point, a melting point for all these different cultures and everything. Also, migrants finding home in Mathare, also others coming from Uganda and everything. And this gives it more of a home for people who are, it has been a home, harboring migrants, harboring those who have been rejected by the system. You remember like the World War or the World War II soldiers coming back and finding that the lands have been taken and then finding home in Mathare. People nowadays travel all the way from rural areas and they come to Mathare and finding home. You find all these migrants from Uganda, from Tanzania, finding home, and that's why you find a lot of different, pockets of different communities from all over East Africa. But then I want to also reject the fact that Mathare, there's been a lot of crime, there's been a lot of drugs abuse, drugs and substance abuse. But then that kind of thing has been very systemic, in a way that there is poverty that has been embedded in here. If you look at Mathare right now, and I actually discussed with a friend that things change a lot, but then Mathare hasn't really changed a lot. If you look at the kind of infrastructure we have on water, electricity, we're not far away from the CBD. We are around 7 or 8 kilometers from the CBD, but then people cannot access clean water. We are not far away from the CBD, but then health becomes a problem. We only had around one public hospital here. If you look at the electricity in terms of access to electricity, we have one of the biggest substation here in Nairobi, the Roraka Kenya Power, substation. But then people cannot access, legal connected electricity. People still have to have to rely on, electricity cutters. So this tells you there's been these kind of challenges, and I feel it's more like more a very systemic thing that has been there because the system feels that if it provides people with, it provides all these basic needs to the community, then it's like they're somehow legitimizing their stay here. Yet they always, the state always feels there's this feeling that Mathare occupies a very prime land since it's close to the city. So like I feel there is that feeling that by them provisioning all these kind of utilities, they might be legitimizing our stay here. And that's why there's always been kind of, mainly there have been a lot of attempts to eradicate Mathare. That's why you find that even in history there have been at times when Mathare has been raised down and still people continue resisting. So yes, there exists crime on one side, there exists poverty, there exists squalor, there exists drugs and abuse, but then there is also on the other hand, you see a very resilient people, a community that is very integrated, although sometimes political differences that are permeated by politicians sometimes do bring problems. But then you see, it brings hope, seeing the kind of, the resilience and how people, innovate the everyday kind of life through medical practices and how they overcome very monumental challenges through the kind of social infrastructure that they build for years. Yeah, there exists those contradictions.
Indeed, and you've been able, indeed, to offer a counter narrative to those dominant narratives that have portrayed Mathare in a negative light. And rightly so, you pointed out to the historical
Mhm.
since independence of how Mathare has been portrayed. But you also mentioned a quote that is it's a famous quote by Maulana Karenga, if I'm not mistaken. And it is the struggle of people against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting.
Mhm. Mhm.
What role does memory play in resistance, and how do you see this book contributing to the collective memory of the Mathare, but also the larger struggle of the African people?
So yeah, thanks so much for that. And when I joined the movement, Gasheke used to say, yeah, I used to quote this quote a lot. It's actually by Milan Kundera. And yeah, the struggle against memory. Yeah, it speaks about, building collective memory because the moment you erase the history of a people, you erase the identity, you erase the direction. Because you're told for you to know how to live forward, you must look first into the past for you to be able to look into the future. And memory plays a very key role. And us being able to memorialize our struggle, memorialize our history, it makes us to be able to own our history and also self-determine our future. And in Mathare, there is this rich history of resistance, the history of Mau Mau, and which the people have never known. Well, I feel somehow it has been more of being erased systematically by the state so that people do not learn about these kind of histories. And the reason for this is the state fears are people that are organized, people who still have memories of who they were, because that still inform the decision that they make. And that's why you've seen Mathare, we've had a lot of, planting trees on issues of ecological justice. And one thing we've been doing is memorializing people who have been killed by the state, the oppressive state apparatus such as the police. We've had a lot of extrajudicial killings in Mathare. Actually, there have been a lot of them in Mathare. So in years from 2014 to around 2018 and 2019, there were a lot of extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances. And for us to try and memorialize these people through trees, for us, it's more of some kind of a green resistance, replacing an aspect that is very dystopic of a death with something that is very, that creates hope, that creates resilience, that creates, ignites some kind of spark in the minds of the people that, yes, this comrade was killed through extrajudicial killing, but then his memory lives through this tree. The survival of these trees shows, it speaks to the issues of, us being able to survive the kind of challenges we go through. And actually, I was just, reflecting with the comrade yesterday. Just imagine the number of trees that we planted in Mathare in memory of different people who have been killed. But then it also speaks, we've planted a lot of trees, but then it's only a few trees that grow to maturity. And the same way reflecting on that, the number of youths that grow in Mathare and who make it out of Mathare, maybe, someday, just saying that I made Mathare alive, it speaks to this number of trees that die yearly, because our soil, the soil has really been poisoned and it cannot support growth. The same way you find our youths, the system has created some kind of environment, some kind of ecosystem that kills our dream and kills youth physically. That's why there's a quote, there's a people say that you can't go the past 25 years in Mathare because most of the time we find our youth die within this range of from 15 to around 24 or 20, 25 years. Most of them will die. And this leads to this, these trees, us planting a lot of trees, but only a few making it. But then with us continuing to plant more trees and, connecting memory and the kind of future aspiration that we have. I think that has been the greatest thing. Yes, they create, it's memory that they're creating through commemoration, so many, but also, them resisting the kind of environment that they've been put through and also offering hope to the community. That has been at least the greatest thing, in trying to embed memory, in the struggle. Because the moment we forget about who we are and our struggle, that's how we lose the direction on where we want to be and who we want to be.
Right, Sam, and very interesting. Something of interest also is that Mathare being an informal settlement, there's the question of housing, and there's the question of living a dignified life. Could you mention anything in regards to the question of housing? Because last year there were floods that were very devastating to the people of Mathare. And what followed then was the demolition of houses by the government, saying that people are occupying or living in riparian lands. Will you expound on that a bit?
One critical issue that has been part of Mathare, our debate for long is the issue of land and also housing. And, Mathare has been a contested space, both physically and, metaphorically. And the kind of politics that we play, it is really a very contested space. And that's why I say that, us being, being in proximity to the CBD, being in proximity to the city of power, that's Nairobi, it has been really a problem because we are viewed, the people of Mathare are viewed as, we are viewed as, some kind of, placeholders. Yeah, you hold the space in the meantime as we look for what to do with the space. You guys are squatters. You have to, yes, we've allowed you to squat there in the meantime as we look for maybe for an investor to do some kind of fancy some kind of residential areas. So there is that, and that there is that kind of temporariness in I always describe it as more of it's more of a permanent temporariness because Mathare has existed for more than 100 years, but then we always feel that this is not a permanent home, this is not a permanent place. And there is that kind of temporariness that is being ingrained in us, and that's why they've never bothered to provide very formal kind of water, utilities, electricity. Actually, the roads have just started being built. Most of the roads that have been built here started maybe being built from 2013. But in the years preceding 2013, Mathare was just a dense forest of aluminum and sheet shacks being built everywhere. And that we've been inhabiting this kind of temporary kind of environment. The other state wants to make us understand that this place is a temporary place for you and you guys are just squatters. And the state has really been looking for a way to gentrify these areas and just move the people of Mathare from this area. So what happened last year is we had one of the most devastating floods that I've ever seen in my life. That is in 2024 April. And what this happened is that a lot of houses were swept, most of those near the river. And because most of them are shacks and they're not well built, so yeah, and we lost around more than 43 people, including human rights defenders from Mathare Social Justice Center. One of them being Mama Victor, who was a coordinator of Mothers of Victims and Survivors Network. Actually, she came to Mathare Social Justice Center as a victim of police brutality. But after years of being with us and organizing with us, she became a champion of campaign against extrajudicial killing because she lost her two sons due to extrajudicial killing. So after these floods happened and we lost a lot of people, we had decided that yes, we'll make ways and know how to build this. But then the government, we thought the government will come in, the government will come in and maybe help its people. But that never happened. And that's why you've been saying that most of you look all the way from the colonial years. We've always, all regimes, including the colonial government, we've had this notion of, having an absent government, an absentee government, and an absentee government in the sense that when development is needed, when the government is needed for emergencies, the government is not there. But then when it comes to repression, when it comes to, meeting violence on its people, when it comes to intimidating its citizens, that's when the government becomes visible. So there is that kind of contradiction in notion that I wanted to answer. The government, yes, being an absentee government, when it's needed by the people, when there's an emergency to be taken care of, when development is needed, when water is needed, education, hospital are needed, the government is an absentee government. But then when they want to, they're profiling, maybe like, or when you're heading to post-election violence, Mathare now becomes visible to the government again. And that's what see security agents now coming up and, putting barricades everywhere along, just around Mathare, just to make sure Mathare is contained and its people do not, just get outside and start maybe, demonstrating or protesting. And after this happened, so we expected the government to come and help its people, but it never did. What the government came is the government took advantage of the situation. Yes, we understand this is a climate-induced challenge that happened, but then the government came in and took advantage of the situation. I know there's a notion by Naomi Klein on disaster capitalism, and for me, I feel a disaster happening and then the government taking advantage of a disaster for them to gentrify people. And I've seen this happen in other countries, so in Latin America, where maybe floods happen, so in coastal areas, but then the government takes advantage of that and moves away indigenous communities from the coastal areas, and then they replace them with very, very fancy, resort cities and everything. That's what is happening in Mathare. So after that happened, the government wants to introduce more what is called affordable housing. And this affordable housing, we've been asking ourselves, the residents of Mathare, how affordable are the affordable housing? You do not just come with a fancy name that's social housing or affordable housing. Yeah, the houses cannot be, they're not affordable to the mama mboga. They're not affordable to the Mjengo person who lives living in Mathare. They're not affordable to that Karamajong teenager girl who came all the way from Uganda and came to live, to work in Italy as a casual labor or domestic worker and lives in Kosovo. How affordable are they to these people who are at the lowest level of society? But we find that these houses are totally not made for us. So what the government is doing is that they come with very kind of fancy kind of, giving them all the kind of name like social housing. But then the end goal is to gentrify the Mathare community. And that is like just scooping us from Mathare and taking us to another place. That is what is happening. And that's why we've been, trying to occupy these areas along the riparian area so that, yes, we are not going to do our house there again, but then we want to plant trees. We want to memorialize those who are lost through the floods. We want to memorialize those who are lost during the COVID-19 crackdown. We want to memorialize the Gen Z protest martyrs. That's what we've been doing. But then the state is so much keen on, building the affordable housing. And another thing that is really happening, which is really, alarming, is that there is a project called Nairobi River Regeneration Project under Nairobi River Commission. And I do not understand why such a project that is being run in Mathare without any public participation of the people of Mathare being involved. The military is the one planning what will happen in Mathare. And if you understand very well, Mathare has been this area that is regarded as a place for rebellions and protesters and everything, and that's why the project had to be given to the military, because it is a message they're communicating. It is the military that has been taking this project. So yeah, it is the military. They're sending certain messages of fear, so that we cannot protest against the military, and yeah, that they will deal with us. Those are kind of the things that have been happening at the moment. But then we're still organizing also through the occupation that we've been doing, through the different ecological justice groups that are being there in the communities. And one thing that differentiates ecological justice with the other kind of work. Ours is a very political work because we understand we need to build an agency. Another thing, we understand the kind of politics that involve, our environment and how the environment that we occupied. But then you find that the government wants people to just plant trees and just make the neighborhood clean. Just some kind of mere environmentalism, devoid all the politics, the undergirding politics that political and socio-economic issues that speaks to our everyday challenges. So yeah, there is the issue that happened last year, and we've been trying, to build a mass, to build a movement of ecological justice group to occupy all these riparian areas, and to self-determine, our dreams and aspirations as a people, because it's been like we've been left with the government. So we have to determine what we want to do with our, the areas that were demolished, were forcefully demolished. That's what we've been trying to do in Mathare at the moment.
Right, and you've added some very important aspects, especially on the climate. And you're saying that it's not climate campaigns and change devoid of politics. Very important. But all through since we begin, you've powerfully traced the evolution of Mathare from a colonial quarry to a political hub. And you've also described to us Mathare's unique position in Nairobi's anti-colonial and post-colonial realities here in Kenya. You also mentioned in the book figures like Pio Gamapinto, and you also mentioned the role of Mau Mau organizing in Mathare. There's also a road called the Mau Mau Road in Mathare. But why do you think Mathare has remained so central to organizing across generations? That is at least like 4 or 5 generations from the independence struggle to now, from colonial resistance to today's social justice struggles. Why has it remained so central when it comes to organizing, especially in Kenya?
Tracing Mathare all the way from the colonial times and looking at its history, how it has survived very many odds. In 1952, Sir Evelyn Baring declared that, Mathare is an illegal area and needs to be razed down, and, banning all the houses. And yet, other areas, yeah, I know there's some two other areas that were some moved away from where they were moved from, they were demolished. But then how Mathare was viewed and how the people are being treated, yeah, it's not like the other areas where I've just been told, you have to move to another area, we are demolishing this area. This one you have like, like raising it down, like, burning it down, burning the memories, burning the history, and burning anything that's there. There is this aspect of them wanting to erase the history and erase the memory of the people, because it's not the same way when you're told, okay, you people have been here illegally, so I need you to move out with all your belongings. You'll move with your books, you'll move with your any kind of thing that reminds you of the place you come from. But then now when it comes to a time when the state comes at night and just raise down your areas, that is now different because you're not be able to carry your things. It means that this thing have to be done, burnt down, and you won't be able to salvage anything from it. And that is the kind of resistance that Mathare has occupied. And also noting that some of the people who came and lived in Mathare, some of them had fought in the World War, in World War II. And there are these people who went to fight in the areas such as, Burma and these other areas who were fighting another crown. And them coming back and seeing we were fighting for these people, we've come back, we expect, at least even if they won't pay us, we need to have our land. But then they are really met with this rule shock. Your land is not there. They are not being paid or compensated. They're still being mistreated in their own land. So the only thing they could do is, come to the city for survival. And they have to pay taxes. And for you to pay taxes, you have to work. And this is why now people start moving in Mathare. It now being a dump site and more of a quarry where, most of the rocks that were building Nairobi and Eastleigh came from. And them occupying that space and saying this is where we'll occupy and this is where we'll work from. And it is these people from Mathare and also another neighborhood that build, I'll say they built Nairobi to what it is at the moment. They built it both with their sweat because they were working in Nairobi and making sure that the city runs, because most of them were working as shamba boys, most of them were working in different kind of manual jobs. And on the other end, Nairobi as a quarry, Mathare as a quarry, Nairobi was built using these stones from, built with these stones, like physically the stones being extracted from Mathare and going to build some houses in the CBD and also in Italy. You see now Mathare building both physically and metaphorically, in that the people, the native Africans are involved in every way in building the city. But then they're still criminalized. They want them to be there. So them coming to live near the city it's more of a statement of resistance of, like rebellion. Yes, this is a place we cannot just build it with a sweat and then go to sleep outside. It's like you are welcomed, you build a house, you have someone to build a house, and then when it reaches the evening, you have to go and live somewhere in the bushes outside. So them coming to build this house and decide, no, we are not going anywhere. We'll stay here and live with you here. It's a statement of, like this kind of, taking power to their own arms and just being openly rebellious. That they will live near the CBD, they will live near Mutaiga, which is just across the road. And this kind of rebellion started with these people, these soldiers who had fought in these wars and who came back. And these soldiers had seen how Europeans suffered in the war. They saw European people bleeding and dying just like them. And so this notion of white superiority complex came down. That's actually these are just mere mortals like us, and they can also die. They can also be inflicted by tropical diseases just like that, and they'll die. And them coming back with this also knowledge of organizing, knowledge on combat knowledge coming with it. They felt, and then mixing with the people who have been oppressed. There was this kind of mixing all the and synergizing this kind of thoughts and energy in one place. It became a center for organizing for these people during the colonial times. And you remember most of the meetings on Mau organizing were being done, I think, in Kiburi House somewhere, and I think River Road, if I'm not wrong. But then, due to the kind of surveillance that was there at that time, you find that they couldn't really organize well in the CBD. So the only closest place that they could organize from was Mathare. And that's when they shifted their organizing from Kiburi House in town to Mathare. And this is why you see that today we have a road named Mau Mau Road, because these people are organizing from this place. And for me, I've had a chance of interacting with my great grandmother, and she used to tell me that most of them used to work in Mutaiga. Actually, my great grandmother, my grandmother, and my grandmother, they were evicted from Mutaiga and Karura areas where they used to live. So for them, they were victims of some lands being registered as white settler land. So for them, they were removed from Mutaiga and Karura areas and go to Mathare. And she used to tell me that they used to work in these areas as Shamba boys and Shamba girls, and these kind of given manual jobs to do there. But then most of them used to smuggle weapons from there if they had a chance, used to smuggle drugs from there. And most of them were being brought to the area that is now Mlango Kubwa, part of Mathare, and parts of Kiandururu and Kiamotesia area. And this is where the organizing was being done. And some of these things that were being smuggled, the money that was being raised from these areas could be dispatched to areas such as Mount Kenya and the Aberdares and other areas where the Mau Mau were fighting. So you find this kind of oppression that was there. And actually, there is a text that I read also finding that the communities from some parts of the countries were being asked to pay some kind of special tax because there's more of a rebellious people. It even fueled further the urge that people had for land and freedom. People needed to control their freedom. People needed to walk anywhere in this country the way we used to do before the colonial powers came. And people needed to enjoy the fruits of the land because, as you know, land is the primary, source of production. But then they've been alienated from the land. They were being alienated from their culture. And even the little freedom that they had been taken. So 1952, all these rebellion starts and the Mau War breaks, and then the Operation Anvils is being launched, and these people are being, Mathare is being torched, people being put in detention in like areas like Manyani and Langata and other areas. And we found that Mathare was really affected because, it was at the center of this kind of organizing and just very close to Mutaiga and everything. And these people, I think, felt threatened. Mathare to Mutaiga just a few minutes walk, and they felt if this could spill, these settlers who are in Mutaiga will suffer fast, and that's why they really dealt with Mathare with a heavy-handedness because they felt this was a threat to them because it was just next door, and that has continued over time. And then after the Mau Mau War, the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, fought for a long time. It was a more of a protected struggle for more than around 11 years. We get our independence in 1963. But then what we get is not like, it's more of a flag independence because the economic instruments of our country were still, in the powers of the crown. And by this time, we get a more of a comprado class that inherits power from the white people. And then they put that in place so that they may continue perpetuating, the interests of the crown and the system. And that's what happened with Jomo Kenyatta coming into power. instead of Jomo Kenyatta acknowledging the kind of organizing, the kind of sacrifice that was done by the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. He took power. He never gave back land back to the rightful owners. Actually, he went on to borrow money from the British government. I'm not sure about around I think 18 million pounds by that. That's a lot of money if you count it if you factor in inflation at the moment. So borrows that money, trying to tell the same people that they have to buy the same land, the same land from from the white settlers, and then it does not make sense. And that's why you see people in Mount Kenya East, the war continued because people like Mariama felt that we never got what we wanted. We were duped because land is a primary source of production. And if land is not given back, it means our economic system is still under hostage. And that's why you see that Jomo Kenyatta, I think 1995, he starts, bombing parts of Mount Kenya East to flush out the Mau Mau who were there. And that's why some of them fled from these areas and some of them had to go to other countries to seek some kind of asylum. And that continues that oppression. And in Mathare by that time, you find that Kenyan women were trying, to resist. Mathare still, they thought that maybe because Mathare, and it was now an independence time that they now get good houses, they'll get water, they'll get road and everything. But then the same mentality that was with the colonial government is the same being perpetuated through their now puppet, who is Jomo Kenyatta. And further, they were still criminalized in the same in their own country, and they felt that maybe this was not what they need, that they fought for. And that's why you see Nyakenya women coming in 1960s and 70s, intervening through their cultural dance and, trying, there's a time there when they're taking Jomo Kenyatta and, after that, intervening on behalf of the resident of Mathare that so that he may not, okay, the Mathare to be demolished because this is the place that they call home. You see, the same kind of oppression is passed to Moi's regime. The kind of oppression continues. Mathare is still relegated to an area that is very much underdeveloped. Nothing is being done. And then the 1982 attempted coup comes. And you see the people of Mathare really suffering a lot from the 1982 coup because we are very close to the Air Force. And we were told that, there's this narrative that the insurgents were hiding in Mathare. And that's why we find Mathare really faced a lot of criminals at that time. A lot of people were beaten and some of them died from Mathare because we felt that they said that Mathare was hiding some of these insurgents from the Air Force. The same thing happens when Kibaki comes into power. Kibaki comes into power. There's a lot of hope in 2002 when I was young, and I've actually discussed that in my book. There was this kind of air in the atmosphere, feeling that, this is a new dawn. It was like the 1994 Mandela moment in South Africa. We also felt the same way. But then, getting to 2003 and 2004, we just discovered there's some kind of betrayal that happened. And this when Mungiki again becomes another problem in the society because people are still jobless. Most youth are jobless. The issue of land has not been solved by now two regimes, and that is more than 40 years. Kibaki coming in, he does not show like he was willing to solve the land issue, which really required more of a land redistribution for us to solve the socio-economic issue that we are facing as a country. So the feeling, and most being people from Central, who had been denied access to their lands, whose lands had been taken, but they were denied access again. So Mungiki now comes again and becomes a problem a bit, becomes a problem. They also find a home in Mathare again. And, that's why Mathare, I think there's something that attracts, this kind of insurgent movement. And them coming to Mathare, there is a big crackdown from 205 and 206 and even 207, and a lot of people are killed. More than 800 people, 800 people are killed, and countrywide. And Mathare suffers a very big loss. And I remember myself being primary by then, and I just saw the first time I saw a person being shot, from some distance. And this is when you see people like I think the head of police, he was called Ali, being, himself just crisscrossing in the alleys of Mathare. That I've never been seen. You've never seen a high-ranking government official being in Mathare, like walking in all these corridors and everything. And for the first time I saw Ali in the street, and then, this is the time I see a person being killed. This is a time when people are being killed in Kosovo, so Kosovo in Mathare Phobi area. People are being killed just during daytime, and some of them being made to lie in the dirty waters of Nairobi River, looking for a gun that had been stolen from a cop. And Mathare really suffered a lot from this. And then really the Mwai Kibaki regime and the 207 thing that happened, you also go, yeah, the 207 also, we had a lot of losses also in Mathare because Mathare people came out in numbers to what was more of a very not transparent election in 207. Then Uhuru comes into power. Uhuru promises to deal with, organized crime in urban areas. But then it's like that was, yes, it's very much concentrated in Eastland, but then there is a special case for Mathare. Mathare is this area where criminals hide, this area where prostitutes are given to children who just become criminal elements in the community. There's that criminalization of our women being prostitutes and our sons being more of criminal. So that war begins, and you find that politicians such as Pangani, having this kind of cops who go around and killing youths, abducting people, and the same kind of criminalization that has been happening for years continues now through extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances in Mathare, and that's why you find Mathare suffers a lot from that. And that kind of resistance is what we see morphing over the years. In 2017, it comes the COVID-19 times and COVID those years of COVID-19, and you find that the state decides to lock the whole of the country, and the people of Mathare being not able to access water, being able not to access some of these services, you are locked in your house for maybe the whole day, and you're told you have to live there and maybe maintain social distance. But then these kind of laws being made without considering the people of Mathare, bring a lot of problems. And there's a time in April 2020, when the COVID-19 was still in its initial stages, you find that Mathare had suffered more deaths due to police brutality than they had suffered from COVID-19. And that's why he decided to organize more of a protest in Mathare, and he even went up all the way to the parliament, and some of the comrades, including myself, being arrested, because this is a time that everything was on lockdown. But then, while things were still on lockdown, you find that the country was not, we've been, somehow quoted by the state and told that you cannot assemble anywhere. But then the people from Mathare felt like, no, yes, you said we cannot, yes, we said we cannot, but then you are continuing to kill us. So that's why we organized a very big protest that really, came all the way from Mathare. We did a protest, and then we went all the way from Parliament. And Matthew, this is a time that when social distance was a big issue. This is a time when the state was saying that people cannot have assemblies. But then the people of Mathare felt that we needed to fight. They felt that they needed to fight for the country when the country had been somehow subdued by all these COVID-19 issues and the kind of rebellion that was there. The people of Mathare still came out and fought for what they felt was true. Because we saw people dying, people being killed, and being told that they need to be there in their houses. Yet these are homeless people who've been living in Mathare. But then, them being killed, like, a person being killed for not being in their house, yet they were homeless people. These are things that really evoke those kind of reasons that has continued. And that's why you see Mathare has continued to be a place of organizing consistently throughout these years. And it now culminates, Mathare Social Justice being formed in 2014. That's when Mathare social justice comes into picture. When issues of ecological justice escalate, Mathare comes into the picture and starts this crusade on social justice issue, which has not been there. And this is where the first spark starts of social justice. And from there, that's when you saw other social justice centers being formed in Kayole, Dandora, Mukuru, Kibera. And now it went from Nairobi, and then the spark spread from there. It went to Kisumu, it went to Mombasa, it went to Kajiado, and that's how the social justice movement was born. And I feel this for me speaks of the writing on Pio Gama Pinto's grave, which is just separated a few meters from Mathare. It speaks on, yet have been extinguished, but that will bore 1,000 sparks from that. 1,000 sparks will be born from that. And for me, that spark that came from Mathare Social Justice Center, it being able to spark more social justice center in Nairobi and also in the country, and now knowing that also the social justice centers in Uganda that have been inspired by what Mathare has been doing, it really connects me to the work that Piogama Pinto was doing. And me seeing, because me having visited his grave and, feeling that this is a site for me that, this gives me more of hope on the kind of struggle that I go through, because this is a matter of the capitalist route that we choose as a country. And for him, he fought for social justice. He fought for socialism. He fought for equality of all people. He was a Kenyan but born from in Goa. But then he did not let his privileges bar him from, creating solidarity with other people. And he always reached out to all these people. And for me, to some extent, I see Pinto playing a really good role, connecting me now to the Mathare issue and everything. I've always felt that Pinto was this glue between the different factions of that were fighting for the, our liberation struggle. Because Pinto, he was connected to the Mau Mau. Pinto was connected to the Asian lawyers who are working really hard to, to get the Mau Mau from the court. Pinto was also still, in connection with some of the trade unions that were in the country. Pinto was connected to some journalist networks in the UK who he could pass messages to them, and also some of them in the House of Commons, in the House of Commons and the House of Lords in the UK, who kept on keeping pressure on the UK government to stop the atrocities that were happening in the country. So Pinto stood more of a nexus between all these forces in the country. But then I also feel that these stories have not been told. Yeah, that's why I also link him to the story, because he was also in link with the Mau people and the Defense Council in Kenya.
Yeah, for sure, indeed. Thank you for situating Pinto in that resistant history. I think that's all. You have covered a lot. You've given us the history of Mathare resistance, and also expounded very well on your book, Mathare, an urban bastion of anti-oppression struggle in Kenya. The book was published by Daraja Press in 2021, and a very great book. And we hope other areas, informal settlements, areas of resistance in Kenya, people can do the same and tell these stories and dignify where they're coming from and counter the narratives and myths. You've also connected the past and present struggles that are situated in Mathare. And I think that's very, very important. So thank you, Sam, for sharing your insights, your memories, and and your commitment to telling the truth in Mathare. For our listeners, you can find more information about the book and Sam's work in the episode description. We shall share the links to the book. Yeah, there goes the photo. Thanks. Until next time, keep questioning, keep remembering, and keep liberating your mind.
Thank you so much to our listeners, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, in solidarity. Asante.
Hizi pingu zimenifunga zikanishinda kusonga mbele, nashindwa kanta shinda hapa milele, nahitaji ukombozi sahi, nahitaji ukombozi sahi.